Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Alright, yes, I can hear you too. How's it going?
Okay. It's going pretty good. Going pretty good. I'm not gonna lie.
I believe
How about you, sir?
last time that we had a session, what rank were you? Gold, I believe, from what I checked.
Pretty sure it was gold. I was in plat. I'm in plat now, but I went to diamond 3 and I'm down to plat. So it was a
Mm-hmm.
weird thing because at a certain point, I was I was in plat. I was figuring out some stuff. Climbed up, got to like diamond 3. Then at that point in time, I was the one who you could significantly see was doing Garbaggio on the team. But and then I constantly went down to plat.
Mm-hmm. And now you're reaching out to
Is
me. I don't know all the reasons. I don't know if what you mentioned about wanting to learn how to self-VOD review is the entire reason
it's
for this or just part of it. So fill me in on those details.
a part of it is like I want guidance from someone more who knows more than me to help me see what I'm not seeing
Mm-hmm.
along because then after that I can apply that knowledge. And on top of that, just like some basic questions and just like overall things. Because last time we had a VOD review, not like a session, and not just a VOD review.
Mm-hmm.
It was nothing really big was going on. It was just small, minute things.
Mm-hmm.
Now I feel as though something big had to happen in order for me to go back, or I just never got better, and then I climbed up and then went back down.
Mm-hmm. Sure. We can dive into it. Do you have a replay code ready for me?
I do, I
Mm-hmm.
do. Uh, Let me ask you a couple of questions though,
Mm-hmm.
just because I have like a
Yep.
list of
Yep.
questions that I want to ask. Is that let me see quick. So, what would be the different playstyles with Genji? Because I know that how you were to analyze somebody as for like let's say because I think I've asked you this before because like how Nekos or advocates would be somebody who would be more reliant on mechanics, but they're not necessarily bad at the other things. They just specialize more in
Mm-hmm.
mechanics. As for you, you might specialize in positioning or timing.
Mm-hmm. So I'm in the practice range. I'm assuming you can see the stream. So I guess to start off, we can get an idea of where you're at with your understanding of Genji. So what can Genji do?
From my understanding, he's a close range flanker or off angler,
Mm-hmm.
and he is able to use his mobility to play hyper aggressive in certain areas. I just sent you the ball, by the way.
Sure.
Um,
That's a very good description of Genji. What else can he do though?
I would say
Forever hold your
he's
peace.
able to dive in along with being able to mark the enemies as well.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And
And it's fine if you don't really have very good answers here for this. I'm putting you on the spot for a reason, right? Because your initial description of Genji is very accurate, but Genji is a very flexible character. And if you are too one-dimensional with your view of the character, you end up missing some of the adaptations that you can make in game that make this character so hard to deal with for most ranks and most levels of play. Heck, even going up to the very highest, right? Overwatch CS. You can pretty much just like one trick this character and deal with basically any comp that the enemy team just wants to throw at you. Right? So one thing I will quickly point out, right? You mentioned you're mainly playing around your right click, essentially, using your mobility to close the gap, threaten engagements, right? Etc. etc. But what about your left click? Is Genji's left click good? What does his left click allow him to do?
It allows him to poke, and in certain compositions, you may not want to get up close. So, like Mei Sim, it'd be better for you to like poke them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you still want to get into a position that might be close, but not too close enough to where they can force you out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So two things that you mentioned right here. One, you have the ability, if you want, to play at a different range based on the matchup. So if characters are good at range but weak up close, you have a very clear goal, right? Close the gap, abuse your advantage in that range. But if they're good up close and maybe they're not so good at range, yes, Genji is not that suited to be a poke character, but he can do it, right? He can use his mobility to take angles and shoot the enemy team from the side, right? Nullifying cover usage, etc. And just being a pest, essentially. And that flexibility is really interesting, right? So one, you have your range, but also because you not only have your close range threat, but you also have the option of shooting at range, you have this dynamic of being able to go in. So right, let's say that you are here and you're shooting and you land good damage, you can go in for a combo and try to finish them off, right? How does a Reaper transition between poke and engagements, right? It's not as clean. Unless it has the major perk for the fast AP, right? It's not very clean, right? A lot of the characters are not gonna have as fluid of a change between these two ideas like Genji has. And that is something that is very much underrated by the player base. Because when they realize how important it is to close the gap on the character, they might overly focus on it and not think about when it makes sense to wait, close the gap a little bit later, utilize your poke damage, either to soften enemies up or just to take on an angle that they cannot force you out of, to force the enemy team to reposition. Things like those, right?
Yeah.
So, in terms of playstyles then, you could create these little boxes of like the close range duel or the long range off angle or whatever you want, right? I don't love thinking too much about playstyles. I like to think more in a general way of like, I mean, in my case, I would call myself like a good adapter, right? I like to adapt to what my opponents have, right? Take in the information, see what is the weakness that I can exploit, right? Like what is my best course of action, right? That's more of what I would categorize my playstyle or Genji's, right? Because the thing with you could argue that Genji has like the long range and close range. It's just a personal thing that I don't like to call those playstyles. So I'm not gonna sit here and just list a bunch of playstyles that you can swap between dependent circumstances, right? You can do this work on your own if you want, right? You just write down what you think is the strengths of the characters and maybe list down some matchups and like how you play against each matchup. It's just a personal thing that I do not want to just sit here in this session and just tell you, hey, this is the playstyle that you do against this character, this is the playstyle that you do against that character, right? I don't love those boxes too much.
Okay.
But yeah, is this what you were looking for out of your question?
It was.
Okay, that's
It
good.
was more or less because I was trying to understand matchups. Is that just pretty much understanding the other character and what their weaknesses, what their strengths are?
Yeah.
Is that pretty much true?
Yes. And Genji is a really interesting character to look at because with Reaper, you don't really have range. All you really have on your character is, okay, maybe I play to shoot tank, maybe I play to shoot backline. But even regardless of the choice, you have to close the gap. So your gameplay cycle is gonna mostly be close the gap, shoot. Right? I'm obviously ignoring some of the timing nuance and whatnot, but you don't really have choices in that sense. So you don't really have to analyze matchups all that much. Sure, playing against a tank that has a stun versus a tank that doesn't have a stun, right? Tanks that are more vulnerable or less vulnerable to you do change it, but you don't really have... But those are minute adjustments. Those are not like major playstyle differences, right? Quote unquote. Whereas with Genji, because you have this much flexibility in your kit, you can very much just play through the opponent's POV, essentially, of, okay, Ashe, what is the identity that Ashe has, right? Where is she strong, where is she weak? Okay, versus Ashe, where would Genji have the best time, the best chances of winning against her? Okay, what about playing against Moira? What does Moira excel at? What are her weaknesses? Where does Genji fit within her spectrum to get the most chance of beating her? So yes, you're correct in that you are gonna be looking at more so at your opponents than you are gonna be looking at yourself here. Exactly because of that Genji flexibility. Even though, yes, you would prefer close range whenever possible.
Okay. Because it'd be, I guess for me, it'd be somebody like Mei. She can hit hard at long range, but she's also good in close range. But so in that scenario, I guess her close range you could still get out of, but I don't want to say you want to be there most of the time against her.
So Mei is a tricky one. How would you identify Mei, essentially, or how would you categorize Mei? Like, what's her identity?
I would categorize her as like a close range brawler. She up close. That's where she works at best because of her wall. She can use that to trap people if they overextend. She can bait people with ice block if they try and go in and they don't force out ice block.
Yeah. Very similar to Genji so far, except for the mobility, right? But again, another parallel to Genji. What about your range?
She can hit hard at range, but she has to hit the shot. Genji is the same way, but I want to say it's the mobility. It's the mobility that makes the difference in between them, because Genji can poke at long range but have a good angle. As for she can use her wall, but it would be harder for her to get to, like, let's say, a long range angle. She probably doesn't want to be there.
Sure. So I would say that Mei has a lot of the similar dynamics with Genji in terms of flexibility as a character. There are some key differences in terms of their ability to get the angle and their staying power. Mei is better at holding space she has, but struggles to get to the space that she wants. Vice versa for Genji, right? Because it has less sustain but more mobility. So Mei would be an interesting case for you to look into, right? That's one of the hardest matchups for you to quote-unquote solve, or at least have a one-dimensional way of viewing the matchup, right? Against the Widowmaker, you know the way that you play Genji into Widow, right? You just set up all the time. You avoid poking within her sightline as much as possible, and then whenever possible, you'll try to close the gap on her and hunt her down, right? Against Mei, when do you shoot her from range? When do you close the gap on her? That's interesting. It's a very interesting matchup to look at.
That's true. I would say for closing the gap, you would want to force out her cooldowns first. Mainly Ice Block. Because if she doesn't have that, even if she has wall, you could still climb over wall and still punish her. From range, in a sense, I want to say it's not just her. It would have to be the entire team. Because playing against just her at range, yeah, you can do that, but there has been cases where I have seen that just you could still take an angle and still force out cooldowns at a close range.
So we have lots of ideas about when to close the gap, when to stay at range. Now let's look at the key differences between the characters, right? Mainly the sustain and the mobility. Thinking about those specifically, can you think about what you can try to exploit as Genji to beat the Mei? Doesn't have to be directly.
I would say with her or against her, it would be just mobility. You could
Yes.
poke her out and then climb away.
Yes.
For health wise, Genji doesn't do good, but he's also very good against her close range as she is him. It's a lot of it is just mobility.
So, in this case, yes, you can use your mobility to try and win in a drawn out poke battle where you're just making yourself very hard to hit, right? Although probably not the way because she has such good sustain, right? So what I was thinking about in terms of your mobility is that basically Mei can't really play to deny you too much. If she tries to deny you, you have the mobility to basically out-rotate her and just get better angles, essentially. So to me, the big exploitable weakness in this matchup, basically, is the mobility. Because the health, she beats you, and in the other cases, it's roughly even, if not favored for her, in both ranges, actually. But Genji has not only a much better ult, but he has much better mobility. So I would look to utilize that either directly or indirectly on her, right? But you see the kind of thought process, like even in this matchup that seems so similar and in a lot of times very annoying for Genji, even there is still like a factor that we can single out and be like, okay, let's try to create a game plan around this idea.
Okay. You're not just thinking about her in and of itself, as you said. She may not have a good time denying you, so then you can go on like somebody else.
Yeah, you can go on an angle, force her to go into you, and then you change angles, or you can just go on journeys that she cannot ever reach, and then you just play to do a better DPS job than her, right? She'll try to kill your team, you'll try to kill hers, do a better job than her, right?
Okay.
Yes. A lot of this stuff, and this is kind of like tied to what you were talking about with like wanting to learn how to self-VOD review, right? A lot of what I'm giving you is like open-ended questions, essentially, right? I'm not giving you a, hey, you do this against that, hey, just copy this gameplay flow, this playstyle, whatever, and you're gonna win games, you're gonna climb out of your rank, right? It's a lot of it is just like giving you agency through questions that are easily repeatable, but that will lead you to different answers depending on the situation, and from there you will not only be able to in the games find better performance, but overall grow more as a player because you're gaining experience, right? You're gaining experience versus Mei, you're gaining experience versus Ashe, you're gaining experience versus whatever matchup, right? So that's what a lot of this is going to be centered around.
Okay, so then how would you cycle that against, like, let's say a comp? So most of the time in rank, you're not going to just have a full brawl comp. It might be they have like a Sigma, Ashe, but then on the other hand, they have like a Mei, Lucio, and it's like it's not all just one thing. It's a mixture of both.
Yeah. So then you start to get more advanced. What is your team running? How do they match up into the enemy team? Now, we won't be able to dive into all the detail here, although if we want, we could just like ignore a potential live coaching purge or even the VOD review and just discuss this if you're interested. But one quick example that comes to mind is, let's say that you're the only one that can contest the enemy team's Widowmaker, right? Their whole team is incredibly slow, and the map is very good for Widow, so you have to go on solo missions for her, right? So in that case, you're just gonna try and figure out how best to, in a way, not utilize your teammates because they're not pieces that you can move on your own, right? Unless maybe you're in a stack and you can tell them, okay, I need you to deal with that, whatever, to free me up to just permago on Widow, right? But you're gonna kind of think about all of the little matchups that are at play right? So for example, maybe the Reinhardt and the Lucio are gonna be looking to run over their Sigma and Baptiste, while their Mei is gonna be looking to contest, I don't know, your Tracer on an angle while you go on the Widowmaker, right? So kind of the splitting, similarly to how you make like complex math equations or any sort of problem really, and just are able to solve them through increasing the amount of problems but simplifying them, right? Make a complex multiplication through separating it into smaller, easier multiplication than just adding them all up, right? The same thing here. You break down your team comp rather than thinking about it as a whole 5 versus 5. You think about all of the small little matchups that are at hand, thinking about how they work and how you might fit into any of them. Do you try to run over the Sigma BAP with your Ryan Lucio? Because in the case that their enemy tracer, let's say, is free, maybe I should be writing some stuff so that we can keep track, right? So you have Ryan Lucio trying to run over their Sigma and BAP, right? And then there is in theory a tracer. So there's a Widow, there's the Genji, and then there is, like, let's say, I think it was the opposite, but whatever. Let's say that for whatever reason, right, your Mei cannot deal with the tracer to allow you just a free 1v1 here, right? Which is what you wanted, because you're the only one that can contest the Widow, let's say. So in that case, you might need to adapt your plans, right? Your Mei is getting beaten here, so now the tracer is allowed to go on you. So maybe you have to stop trying to take this because now it's disadvantageous for you. You're not meant to win this anymore. Now maybe you go with your Ryan Lucio and you transform this into a 3v2, or if the tracer joins in, a 3v3, but the tracer is not really gonna do too much to help these players getting ran over, right? So maybe that way you can win the game. So yes, it's not a perfect approach, just like try to simplify the game down by breaking it into smaller chunks. But it even when that kind of like breaking things down into chunks doesn't work because one of the chunks is not properly chunking, right? The chunk is like the Mei is failing her job, right? You can still use that information to see, okay, how does that change my game plan? What am I gonna do from here? What is my path forward? Yeah, I wouldn't dive too deep into that type of stuff yet. I would rather, I think it is best to first focus on the level 1, right? Which is just like you versus whatever on the enemy team, right?
Okay.
And then once this is very comfortable, right, you can move over to level 2, which is what we're talking about, which is just like the team versus team, right?
Okay.
But does this kind of logic follow through?
It follows through. I can just understanding the individual matchups on your level, and then further on go to a team level.
And the important thing here is that all of the complexities that we're talking about do not come from the important part to take away from this session, right? I don't care if you don't remember a single thing that we talked about matchups. Heck, a lot of the things that I'm talking about in terms of matchups are not necessarily correct. I'm just spitballing randomly, right?
Okay.
What I want you to take away is the easy to remember questions that you can ask yourself on most situations that will lead you to an answer that will help. The answers will be complicated, but the input that you're putting in, right? The question is always the same and it's always simple, right? So, how do I want to play versus this character? And then you think about your range and their range and your sustain and their sustain and or whatever else. But the question, very simple to remember, right? Just a single thing, a single sentence. That's all you need. It's the same approach that I was using, for example, for Blade, and I think it's a really good one, which is just thinking, what are their counterplay options? That is the phrase. What are their counterplay options? They have damage, they have cooldowns, they have so many different things, right? Between cooldowns, they have like mobility, they have boops, they have sustain, whatever, right? There's so many pieces that you can look into, but because the question is so simple, whenever you want to blade, if you remember that question, you'll be able to follow through in your minds, okay, what do I need to watch out for? Or a fade, casted a hinder, whatever. What are my plans against them? Right? But input is the same. This input is simple, so you will remember it. That's the goal, essentially, here. So don't worry if you cannot memorize the matchups or whatever. If you come out of the session and you don't know what to do, I have failed you as a coach. That's essentially it, right? Because what I'm trying to get you to remember is something very simple. And from there, you'll be able to build your own experience, you'll be able to self-VOD review, etc.
Okay. So just asking myself basic questions and getting to an answer.
Yeah. And over time, by the way, let's say that you ask yourself this question of like, what are their counterplay options? But then you notice that in some cases, this question does not really lead you to the answer that you're looking for, right? So maybe you are like, I don't like this question very much. Maybe I can change this question. So then you maybe change what are their cooldowns, or what are, I don't know, brainstorming. I don't think that there really is a better phrase in this case, but in case the phrase is bad, you don't like it, and through experience, right, through playing and using the question, you figure out a shortcoming, you can adapt the question. Still trying to keep it simple, but trying to make it accommodate for as many scenarios as possible.
Yeah. Let's look at the VOD and see how this would work in game.
You did say that you had a lot of questions listed up, so I wonder if you have many left, and if they're worth going over before or later, so just let me know the amount roughly.
I would say most of the questions were already just explained, because like I had a question about the comps, but then that mixed in with matchups. The VOD review in and of itself, that's understand.
But we had a lovely talk.
The first one, yeah, most of the things were like figured out. Besides just like, I guess the one question was like, how would you poke in a sense? Because I understand I understand the whole forcing cooldowns, but you get on an angle. How would you like force a cooldown? Because if they see you, it's going to be an even trade, because they might force you out, force deflect, or force dash, but you might force something else out. If they don't see you, that's good, because then you can easily get a cooldown and get out.
Sure. That's probably a question that is going to be better answered through the VOD, because you can then look into specific scenarios and try to place you at a good spot where you can get essentially a disproportionate trade. This is a useful concept to think about in the game. A lot of the time, what you're going to be looking to get are kills, because that's the most straightforward way of actually winning the game, right? The team that frags out the most is going to usually have the most objective control, which will lead to the game win, right? But thinking about kills is not always going to lead to kills. And so a common shortcoming for DPS players is thinking that if they're not getting kills, they're failures, right? They're not doing their job, which is not true. Trying to get kills is going to lead you to value in other ways. You're going to force cooldowns, you're going to make your opponents change positions. So the important thing here is to broaden the concept of a kill into a trade instead, right? And I don't mean you trade your life 1-for-1. I mean the resources and other things like that, such as space and whatnot, right? So if you engage the enemy team in a poke battle and you take a disproportionate trade with them positively, right? That means that you have dealt more damage than them, you have forced more cooldowns than you have lost, etc. Thinking about the game this way is gonna help you spot value in other situations, or spot when you're missing value, you're losing a trade with another player, right? And that's causing your team to have a tougher time, because you're not doing as much as the enemy team DPS is doing. And then that's putting a lot of burden on your team to perform, right? So that's essentially the lens through which we're gonna be viewing a lot of these poke battles or just poke angles in general, because there are some poking angles that you can use that you take 0 damage in, but if you land basically 0 damage, they're not really all that worth, right? And in case you're landing good damage but you're taking more because and true that you're requiring more heals than your opponents, then maybe it's not so worth it, right? So we have to find the balance on like the angle that allows you to land more damage than you take. That's usually the main goal. I'm painting with a broad brush here, but that's usually the kind of thing that we're thinking about in this situation.
Okay.
And for a more practical way of thinking about this, let's play this out a bit. I'm gonna pause at a specific moment, and we're gonna use what we have been talking about so far in the session to think about how you poke here, because you can't really engage up close, right? Trying to hold any sort of forward position this early on in the fight when the opponents haven't even walked through the choke is kind of bad, because you're not Tracer, you're not as horizontally mobile to just leave whenever you want, and there are not really very many good setups, right? Like this, either here or below, is too far for your escape paths and from your team and whatnot. You can't really use this too much. You're kind of waiting for your opponents to come through the choke using an angle like this or inside here or whatever, and then you can think about close range. So basically what I'm trying to get at is that for now, you are a poke bot. That's all you're gonna do. And then once they get close, then you can think about your close range. But for now, you want to poke. So, with the matchups, who on the enemy team do you need to watch out for in terms of a poke battle?
It would be the Ashe. She's the most highly likely to at long range.
Who else?
Ilari. She's very good as well.
And then maybe the Juno a little bit, but not really. The rest is just kind of like, you don't really care about the Doom, you don't really care about the Reaper, right? You easily beat them in the poke battle. And I beat them here is because you just got a better trade, right? That's all. You got a better trade, you're doing your job. So yeah, mostly these two. So, they have better range than you. How do you get a positive poke trade against them here? Let's focus on their positioning here, right? So, Ashe, Ilari. And these are roughly their sightline, right? You can think about this in two ways. Either directly getting a better poke battle with them, or indirectly. I would like you to try to answer both, one at a time. Where do you need to position to win? Whatever. Which one do you want to start with?
I'll go with directly. If I'm going to directly go after them, I'm going to poke for one of their... I'm going to use my cover to poke them. As for when they move up, because when they move up eventually, I'll then go over and attack them. Or indirectly, I'll pressure out maybe the tank or the Reaper, and that's what's going to cause both of them to look at me. The Ilari will probably go to healing, and the Ashe will probably throw maybe dynamite or just pull their attention to me.
And the best part here is that all of those details are great. I love hearing those here, and I love seeing that you're thinking this far ahead. But we don't even need to go that far for you to have a good trade. If, let's say, you're positioned here, where the Ashe and the Ilari currently do not have a sightline on, right? And they also have a Mega to play around here, and you have easy cover this way, right? They can never chase or anything like that. So this is a really good position here. You completely avoid their sightlines, and you can land free damage on the Doom and the Reaper, because they are further pushed forward, right? They are the frontliners as of this moment. So this is the way that you would get a disproportionate trade with your poke against a composition that, while not fully better at poking than you, in this case they should be better at poking than you, or at least you should have a hard time poking against them, right? At least that's the theory. But the theory doesn't hold up in this case, right? Because you have this angle, and then later on you can think about different angles and whatnot. But that's the interesting thing to think about, right? Even though in a vacuum you are worse at poke than them, you have not just this approach, but even another one that we're going to talk about soon, about how to beat them in just straight up a poke battle. So yeah,
Well,
this is a cool one, and this is the position that I think would be nice. You could maybe do a slightly different position, like inside here, because it should give you an angle in the Doom while avoiding these, right? But I think that it's a little bit worse. Although it's closer, so if you want to transition from poke to close range, you're already there. So that's interesting.
yeah, because I was gonna say the area where the mega is, that seems rather too far. Even though it's better in poke and it's better against them, I would want to say that's too far though. Is it
Yes, I think so. I think so. You will take too long rotating when the enemy team wants to push to be useful here. And you cannot really transition this way because it's too easy for them to just keep an eye on there. And the moment that you start walking, you just get blasted before you close the gap. So I don't like that position. And you're kind of already going up to the level 2 that we were talking about earlier with like the whole team thing. Not exactly, but kind of. So that's great. You'll probably have an easier time than most trying to incorporate these ideas into your gameplay. Now, let's think about the other approach, how to beat them in a poke battle directly, even though they are better, quote-unquote, at range than you. Hint at the quote-unquote. Where do you need to position?
For a good poke battle, I would say at a closer angle. So constantly going in and just making small, just being very annoying.
So maybe like climbing over here and just shooting from this angle?
Mhm.
Sure. So in this case, you're being unpredictable, you're abusing their attention and being elsewhere to take shots at them without taking damage back, which allows you to take a good trade, yes. But even then, even without being sneaky, what's the position that you can play? Because this is an aspect that's often overlooked by Genji players.
What is a good angle to win a poke?
It's within their sightline here, right?
I would say playing near the soldier. Playing close to the Sigma.
Nope. And this move is bad, by the way. I want you to be playing further.
Playing near the Ana? Near the fire truck?
Yes, yes. But not because of the cover. Gonna give you a hint. The position I want you to play is roughly here. Why?
Because of the range?
Yes.
Or
Yes. That's the funny part.
what's that?
You don't really want to engage in a poke trade with them because of the range. But also you can engage in a poke trade with them because of the range. What part of Genji's kit am I mentioning? What about him allows him to actually engage in a long range poke trade and win against theoretically long range characters? And win, I don't mean kill, I mean get a positive trade, right? As we were talking about earlier.
It'd be like his poking. He's able to shoot at range as well.
I mean, yes, but that's not
live.
all.
And mobility?
No. Think directly. Damage. That's the number one thing. Damage. If you are playing from here, you're gonna lose a damage race against them. If you're playing here, what about this position allows you to out-damage them?
They won't be able to shoot you as consistently because you're not up close.
That's not it.
And but
That's fine. I'll just give the answer here to not drag this out too long, because it's something that people forget. Genji has no fall off. It sounds counterintuitive to play further away because that makes your own shots harder to hit. But Genji has no fall off as a property of basically every single projectile weapon in the game. They have fall off. So if you play this far back, they will not be able to hit you for basically any damage. And you can still hit them for full damage. Now, you're not gonna land that many shurikens, but at the same time, in this situation, shooting down main is gonna lend you good value because there are some specific spots that are hotspots, as I like to call them. So for example, this little corner is a hotspot because the Doomfist wants to avoid sightlines from your team. So this corner allows him to avoid some sightlines like the Ana can shoot him, and also allow him to quickly duck behind cover after he peeks if he takes too much damage, right? So if you just spam in this way, you're gonna land much more damage, right? So there are techniques that you can use essentially, right? Mixing in your no fall of weapon plus utilizing enemies' attention, right? Maybe they're not paying attention to your angle, right? In this case, maybe you could even think about this angle, though I don't think that this one is too far. And or this idea of like hotspots of where enemy team is going to become clumped up or most likely to move towards to land more damage and thus get a positive poke trade. Now, this is not going to happen often with Genji, but the important part here is not so much what we have as an answer for you to get into your repertoire, right, your experience, but rather just the exercise itself, right? Working through the problem to try and figure out how much we can even expand our horizons to figure out what might be an approach, right? Because I don't think that this is the best path here. I think that most likely being here using cover and then just transitioning to close range when they get close is probably the best bet. I usually default to either here or on the window. I really like this angle.
Okay. Because I was going to say that angle, it feels as though it's good if your team is playing in a way that it helps that angle. Because for this, I want to say like the Sigma is a bit really far up.
Yes.
The Doom's close by, the Reaper's close by. Everybody's more forward.
Yes.
I'd rather be more forward with my team so that if something happens, that I can go.
Yes, that's good. You're thinking very far ahead, and that's the kind of thought process that you're gonna need for the higher level plays, higher level ranks, right? So that's great. You have a lot of experience that already helps you in this regard, which is great. Now, if you were thinking about it from their perspective a little bit, you might notice that yes, you can in theory win the poke trade against them in a vacuum, but then again, who says that they need to shoot you? They might notice that it's a waste of time to shoot you and just shoot at your team instead, right? And then they're gonna be landing more damage than you again. So now this angle falls flat. So I think that while we brainstorm some ideas, I think that the best angle is this. But the main purpose of this specific, like looking at this scenario specifically, was just to basically show you how far we can think, what kind of ideas we can explore, like fully utilizing our kits, fully thinking through with their kits and whatnot, to figure out potential answers. You may not be able to do that in game. You might need to look into, you might need to just go at the hero roster and spend some minutes looking at the characters to figure out general approaches for them, right? Or looking at a VOD to look at what you should have done, just like we're doing now. Right? And then you try to implement those in the game. But again, it's the same system of simple question and then try to develop the answer from there.
Okay.
Now, we did not cover very much how to self-VOD review, so I'm gonna be very quick about this here because it's relevant. Usually the way that you self-VOD review is by picking a team. You can do that in a very simple manner. Either something that you're interested in learning, right? I very recently was very interested in working my mechanics, so I just worked on them. I didn't care if it was optimal or not to work on my mechanics, right? And then I just went into VODs and looked at my mechanics, looked at specific points of it, like, oh, is my shot timing, right? So I would go into the VODs and think about my shot timing. I would think about my crosshair placement. I would think about, you know, you can list a bunch of ideas, and basically you just tunnel on that. If let's say that we go into this VOD and we think about just your deflect usage, we just speed through it, right? Skim through the VOD until a deflect. The moment that you deflect, we look at that moment, we evaluate it, and then we skip to the next one. And then we evaluate and we skip to the next one. That's basically how self-VOD reviews go. You just pick a topic and you solely focus on that topic. And then once you're satisfied with the work that you put into it, you move on to something else, right? That's basically how it is. It's gonna take a while to do everything, but that's how it is for any skill, really, at a high level. It just takes thousands and thousands of hours for it to become a master.
Okay. Let's see.
2, 1. Attackers incoming. Defend objective A.
Now, why did you choose this VOD?
Because it was a game where I felt as though I should have won, but it seemed like something didn't align properly and I lost. I was going very well and I lost.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was popping off.
Sure. So, since we talked about self-VOD reviewing, since we talked about a lot of different topics too, although we're trying to keep the questions, right, the input that you put in simple, so that you can easily remember and apply it, and build experience on your own once I'm not here to help. Let's try to do a demo version of this essentially here. What would you like to focus on in this VOD? Do you want to focus on thinking about like spotting the weaknesses in the enemy comp and trying to exploit them? Do you want to focus on your position? Do you want anything really? Doesn't even have to be something that we talked about in the session.
I guess it is the weaknesses. I have a hard time. I don't usually think about that all too much, so I want to say that.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to work on that. Now you need to figure out how you're gonna be able to work on that. So what do you need to look at in the replay? And if you were looking at a cooldown, it would be very straightforward, right? If you were thinking about your timing, I'm just gonna quickly explain this to give you an example of what you're gonna have to think about here. If you were thinking about your timing, you would be looking at when activity is happening, right? So is your tank engaging with the enemy team, right? Like engaged in combat? Is your team engaged in combat with the enemy team, right? How many players are looking at you? Those are parameters that you can use to figure out if your timing was good or bad, right? So basically, you go through this process of figure out the topic, figure out the parameters to judge the topic by, and then you go in and then you apply those parameters to all of the moments to judge. And then you take away the feedback and then try to apply it, right? In this case, you want to think about the matchups, right? The weaknesses. How are you going to evaluate that?
I would say looking at whether they're isolated, whether it was good, whether it was a killable target or a target I can attack. So whether they were isolated, low health, or just had no cooldowns.
Sure. In this case, I would argue that what you're trying to work on is less so like the specific matchup weaknesses that you can exploit, and more so your ability to finish targets, right? Those are more parameters for that. If you wanted to think about the matchups here, what I would suggest is first taking a look at the enemy characters, going through their strengths and weaknesses, and seeing where best you can insert yourself. So as a quick example, against Doom and Reaper, you probably just want to stay far away, right? Or at the mid-range where you can take an advantageous trade. And that's basically all there is to the matchup, right? Fairly straightforward.
Okay.
Against the Ashe and the Illari, same thing. They have a very sharp identity in that they're very good at range and they're not really good at close. So you probably want to insert yourself in the closer ranges, right? And so after you make those judgments, then you can just be like, okay, I am in the fight and I'm engaging the Doomfist, right? That's the current example. Am I engaging the Doomfist based on the parameters that I talked about earlier, right? Am I at mid-range?
Mm-hmm. This is mid-range area.
Yes. So this is good. If I was engaging the Doom up close, then maybe you ask yourself if this is a situation where staying up close to the Doom actually makes sense. If so, great. If not, yeah, you learn from it. That's it. So in this case, this specific topic to work on does require a little bit of prep work for you to know exactly, okay, how do I want to play into those characters? And then based on the character that you're currently fighting, you just quickly judge. Are you within your ideal range, right? Or your ideal parameters? If so, great. If not, bad. That's it. And you go from there.
Okay. Okay.
So, for the sake of time, let's just use these parameters that I talked about. Staying at range against the 2 close range threats, and staying far away or getting up close to the other characters, right? I'm gonna include Juno in there too. So, are you doing a good job?
Yes.
Yep, that's it. That's all there is to it. And you can microanalyze this if you want, but I don't really feel that much of a need. You were out, right? The Larry, you notice the Larry was at range and you immediately look behind cover, right? That's just standard. Those are minute things that we're gonna expect you to already know, so it shouldn't really have to go over, right? This is more relevant. So is this good? Let's look at your approach on the Ashe. You peek her at this range. Good, bad?
Good, because she's not paying attention to me.
And what about the range?
Good.
Yeah, that's all there is to it. Now, if you want to think about it a little bit further, maybe with the Reaper in there, this is less good. But even then, right? The analysis here is mostly straightforward. Most of the work was put beforehand, right? Just prepping the review. Okay. So, we already know the answer to this one, right? Bad. We're losing this trade. So what do? We close the gap. So is this good, bad?
This is good.
Now, small detail here. This is good in theory. How much health do we have? How much health do we have?
We don't have a lot.
So can we make this play?
You can, but it's going to be risky.
I would say yes, you can. Just wait a few seconds. Your Ana shoots you once or twice. Now you go, and then this play is perfect. All right. Sure. In this case, the Doom is completely alone, no cooldowns, right? You don't mind being up close, so it's fine. Reaper is vulnerable, same thing. Yeah, same thing. Good, bad.
Good.
Meteor strike. Barrier is splintering.
No need to repeat. Ah, there you go. So, let's actually stop before the dash. Good or bad?
This is bad. This range right here is bad.
What range do you want to be?
I want to be up close
Why? Against who?
against the Alari because she's low right.
Your dash. You get the kill. Now what? Is this good or bad? What range do you want to play into these characters?
I want to play at mid range,
Mm-hmm.
mid to long.
So does this make sense?
No.
Yeah. So wasteful deflect lands basically no damage on the Reaper, just asking to get punched and whatnot, right? If you stay at range, these characters do nothing to you, they just slowly die. Yeah. So here, open up your angle. Now this is good, don't close the gap, and you can see that they don't land much damage. Now, the person that's landing good damage on you, right? Ash. So you're in theory doing well into these, but you're doing badly into her. So this complicates things a bit. But not really, because she just beats you at this range, regardless of you're shooting someone else or shooting her, right? Like even if you're shooting her. So if you're shooting someone else, it's even worse. So this is bad, right? You're losing the long range trade because Dash can see you. That's all that needs to be assessed. This was good, right? Almost glossed over it, but that was good. Sure. Mostly playing around or playing out of Doomfist's range while trying to close the gap on the rest. Directly what you're doing. Now, I'm gonna stop here. Is this making sense?
As in just this entire concept?
This process of like self-VOD reviewing, what we're doing of like, we identify the topic, we set the parameters, and most importantly, once that is done, just like actually skimming through the replay until we find something relevant and quickly going over it.
Yeah. For this singular topic, yes. I guess for most topics, it's just me trying to find the parameters. That would
Yes.
kind of be confusing, but I want to say
Mhm.
for this, it makes sense. We try and find out, we look at the matchup, figure out what their weaknesses are. Good against Ashe, Illari, close range, bad against Doom and Reaper, close range. We use that to where up close with them, for up close against Illari, Ashe, we're good. Up close against Doom, Reaper, we're bad. Go next.
Mhm.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the actual process of the self-VOD review of like playing and then looking at the range that you are against each character, right? Very straightforward. Here, good or bad?
Bad.
Yeah. A little bit too close. Or almost out of fall off. Middle kick duck. Behind cover. So yeah. You're trying to get up close to them. Yeah, this should be good, right? So the actual process of the self-VOD review is very straightforward. The most complicated part is just the preparation, knowing what topic to work on, which I like to simplify by just working on something that you're interested in, right? So the only real complication is figuring out how to judge yourself. That's the main one. That one, either you ask for a little bit of help, right, from either people on my server or whatever else, right? So you want to go to social media and ask on a Reddit forum or something, I don't know, right? But we can also just quickly do an exercise here for this, right? How would you judge your positioning?
I guess my positioning wasn't bad.
I'm not
To
talking about this
where-
game. I'm talking about
No, not talking
how
about the
how
game,
would
Jim.
how would you self-VOD review positioning? What would you have to look into to judge if it's good or not?
I would say the range, and on top of that, cover,
Mm-hmm.
and also escapability if you have an escape plan.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And I would add one last thing. I would think about the matchup The matchup is relevant here. It's similar to what we're doing now, right? It only makes sense to stay close if it's a character that you beat up close, right? Same thing if it's the opposite, right? It only makes sense to stay far away if it's a character you beat from far away, right? But yeah, you did mostly right. So you just have to think about what is relevant to the topic, right? That's really all there is to it. Some topics are gonna be easier to figure that out than others, but for the most part, from what you have been saying in the VOD review and everything, I trust your knowledge. I trust your ability to figure out the parameters. You have shown a very good ability to like follow through these questions with like a solid thought process, essentially. Just like thinking through, okay, what could be good about this approach, but also what could be bad about this approach. Okay, how does this information change my not decision, not outcome exactly, the conclusion. Yeah, there you go, right? So you're doing a really good job of that. So I trust you with figuring out the parameters and everything.
Okay.
The time for the session is ending now. So what we can do here is, and this ends up being like very on topic for the session, you can finish watching the VOD on your own. Because you have the tools to do it. If you have any questions, you can ask me.
Okay.
But I would highly recommend you to, even if you think that you're struggling, right? Or if you are struggling, try to follow through with it, right? Start is always the hardest part. Once you get a little bit more familiar with your shortcomings, what was feeling good, what was feeling bad, you can work on either creating a better system to review yourself, right? Or knowing how to ask for help a little bit better, or whatever it may be, right?
Okay.
And then, do you have anything else that you would like to quickly go over before we finish this? I will write some notes on the DMs after I close the recording, and also the VOD will be up not long after.
I don't really have any more questions, to be frank. I guess everything was answered all the way through. Too much.
That's good. Now, this is a little bit less usual of a session, in that while you do have clear feedback, you do not necessarily have as clear of like a way to rank, let's call it, right? Sometimes after sessions, people just jump right in and they easily just like win some games with newfound knowledge or whatever, and then they just climb immediately. This one probably not gonna be as immediate, right? This is more of a long-term thing where I'm giving you the weapons essentially to just be able to improve on your own and build experience in a very self-sufficient and also very fail-proof way. So you might not be able to see immediate rank improvement, but that's never the goal anyway, for the most part, right? The rank is always secondary, right? First comes the improvement. If you feel like you're getting smarter about your matchups, if you feel like your gameplay is getting better and whatnot, once you hit a critical point in skill, you will rank up as a consequence.
Okay.
Alrighty.